Hi folks, welcome back. So I wanted to make a quick video with a brain dump of what I see as the state of the various frontier large language models as of the end of 2025. I'm recording this in late November 29, 2025. Big disclaimer upfront. This is completely subjective based on my vibes using these models. There's no objective, rigorous benchmark or anything like that. I'm just sharing my vibes. So, to start with, what do I use these models for? And that will maybe help you understand my takes on which ones I use for what things. So, of course, I use it a lot for coding. I also use them as a general purpose computing tasks model where I have an agent.md or a claude.md in my top level home directory. I've made some videos on that setup. I'll link to those in the description. Then, of course, I use it a lot for research. A lot of what previously would have been web searches has been completely replaced by asking an LLM, hopefully connected to the web. And then I also use it a lot as what I'd call an intellectual sparring partner, where I have some half baked idea in my head and I'll try to refine it over a long conversation with an LLM and ask it to critique it or look at it from different angles and so on. So these are mostly the kinds of things I'm using these models for. I'm going to look at the three big ones. So that's the OpenAI family, the Anthropic family, and the Google family of models. So let's start with OpenAI's GPT family of models. And this includes GPT 5.1 and also the Codex variety, which appears in their coding agent. So I use Codex CLI in the terminal a fair bit. And I think that their Codex model, especially the latest Codex Max variant, when used with high reasoning, is very, very good. I would say it's neck and neck with Claude Code in my subjective use of it. But there are other reasons why Claude Code pulls ahead slightly, and we'll get into that later. And then I also use the ChatGPT app a lot. This is pretty much my daily driver LLM. I find its voice mode to be really good with a very natural sounding voice, extremely low latency. It naturally reacts to interruptions and things like that. And then the memory feature in ChatGPT really increases its utility to me. So it has built up a memory of the kinds of things I ask about and the things I've told it about myself. And it uses that in answering my chats. And that is extremely useful. And there's a bit more going on than just the memories that it has saved. Because if you go a few levels deep in settings, you can actually see the memories it has. And they are just a handful of very thin bullet points. So I think behind the scenes, it is also doing some kind of retrieval over my chat history and not looking at just those memories. But this is one feature that makes it extremely sticky and extremely useful for me. Okay, moving right along, let's look at the Anthropic Claude family of models. I also use Claude a lot, and most of my use of Claude is through the Claude Code CLI. I do think it has the edge when it comes to coding agents, again, purely based on my subjective feel. I know in the benchmarks, they all seem to be neck and neck, or maybe one is 1 or 2% ahead of the other on Bench or something like that. But in my day-to-day use, I like Claude Code's performance a lot. There's one caveat which I run into every now and then, and it's jarring and noticeable simply because this is the kind of thing that is fairly rare with most LLMs today. And I run into some bugs in instruction following with Claude, even the latest Opus 4.5 model, where even though I've given it a sequence of steps to follow in a markdown file, sometimes it will just skip a step. And then when I point it out, it'll go, oh, you're absolutely right. Compared to Codex, which is an extremely diligent robotic instruction follower, it always follows to a T whatever instructions you give it. So this is the one fly in the ointment of using Claude Code CLI, which otherwise I love. Now, I think the one thing that the Anthropic verse has on all the other families like OpenAI or Google is that Anthropic are really great at coming up with these really useful abstractions, which are not really advances in core model capabilities, but they work at a layer above the model and add so much more utility to the models themselves. So, big examples of abstractions like that are things like MCP, which came out exactly a year ago. Of course, that's been a wild success. It's pretty much the de facto protocol that everyone uses to connect their APIs or data sources to LLMs. And then the more recent example is Skills, which again is a very simple abstraction, but that's a good thing. It's nothing but a pre-packaged set of instructions or templates or code snippets, all packaged up in a standardized way. And the thing is, with both these abstractions, people had ways to do the same thing that these abstractions do, but everyone was rolling their own slightly different implementations. So just the act of standardizing it has a lot of utility. And then using Skills, Claude has built up a lot of great utility because of all these models, it's the only one that can fluently read and write things like PowerPoint and Word and Excel files. And a lot of that is done with skills that Anthropic have shipped specific to these file formats. And that brings us to Google Gemini, and they recently released Gemini 3. Now, I don't use it as much as the other two families of models. Like I was saying, ChatGPT is my daily driver when it comes to the app, and then for coding, I use Claude Code with Codex being a close second. But there is one thing that Gemini 3 does better than everyone else. And not even better, it's the only one that actually does it. And it does a really good job at it. And that is video understanding. So if you want your model to look at a video and understand it, so understand what is being spoken on it, in it, understand what is being shown in it, the video understanding of Gemini 3 is the only game in town. So I heavily use it for things like summarizing YouTube videos or even analyzing and making rough cuts out of my long family vacation videos and things like that. Because it's one thing to take a transcript from a video and then summarize the transcript, but it's another thing to understand what's actually being shown in the video. For example, if someone is presenting slides while talking over them. So if you were to ask a question like, find me the timestamp when someone walks out with a red umbrella, Gemini 3 is the only model that can answer a question like that. All right, I'll close with some quick thoughts on how do you even choose a model. Now, the biggest thing is that we are actually very much spoiled for choice. I think whichever company slash family of models you go with, they're all pretty good. I do think Claude, especially with Opus 4.5, definitely has an edge in coding. That's one standout, but I don't think you can go wrong with any of these models. If you look at the benchmarks, they're all neck and neck within a few percentage points of each other. So I don't think it's really a choice based purely on benchmarks. At this point, choosing a model based on benchmarks sounds like choosing a CPU purely based on its spec int score. There's so much more that goes into that. And I think the messy part of this is that it is a purely subjective decision at this point. It's almost like choosing between Microsoft Office or Google Workspace. They're sort of kind of neck and neck in terms of features, and a lot of it comes down to either taste or personal preference or organizational constraints. For example, your company might be committed to using one of these companies' models. The only systematic way, or even systematic slash vibes based way to do it, is to have some sort of a personal eval where you have a bunch of tasks that you do very commonly, very often, and you run them through all the models and see which one comes out ahead for your personal basket of tasks. And I wish it was cleaner, that there was an easier way to choose the best model for you. But I think that is where we are as of right now. All right, I hope you found that helpful. If you like content like this, like the video, consider subscribing, and I will see you next time. Thanks.